What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Wednesday, September 5th, 2018, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday, and whatever insanity is in store for us in the coming days, weeks, and months here. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions here. And let's get right on into it. A lot of stuff going on over in Syria. A lot of stuff going on in a lot of these conflict zones here. You wouldn't know it watching corporate media. It's still all Kavanaugh all the time. And I understand it's an important issue, but there are other things going on out there. Well, apparently last Friday, the presidents of Iran, Russia, and Turkey, they're meeting this Friday, 2 days from now, for a summit expected to shape the future of Idlib province, which is, as you know, this last major rebel bastion. And Turkey's kind of in this gray zone. They want to hang on to that Afrin, and Syria may let them to keep their support. So we'll see what's going on. But basically, they want to get the jihadist groups out. They basically want to shut them all down, so they don't just hop to another country and cause trouble there. And Trump is still out there saying, well, if there's a humanitarian disaster, we must intervene, so forth and so on. But Assad is getting ready. This is going to be the last major showdown of the Syria war. After Idlib, this thing is over, and Assad has won, and the United States has lost, unless they just haul off and go on in with a full-on attack without any reason for doing it other than they just want to do that. Now, Russia has a lot of assets in the area. We've been hearing about the 25 warships they have off the coast, trying to sort of deter the U.S. Navy from getting too close to the Syria coastline. And apparently there was this unscheduled visit by the Iranian defense minister to Damascus in order to agree to a Russia-Syria-Iran response to any U.S. attack on Syria. So they're thinking it's really going to happen, that the U.S. is going to come on in and they're going to have to do something about it. And this is incredibly dangerous because, again, this is going to bring the U.S. and Russia into direct conflict with each other. It won't be just a Cold War making the defense contractors rich. This is going to be a for real hot war. And it could spin out of control so quickly between hotheads, in the command positions, mistakes being made in the control rooms, and the really scary part nobody seems to be thinking about. All these automated systems operate so fast, they could make a mistake before any human could intervene. Now, there's this journalist, Francesca Totolo, who was interviewed over in Sputnik News about how basically the U.S. constant crying chemical attack has lost all credibility. The world simply isn't listening anymore, and that may be why we're not seeing a false flag attack, because Washington, D.C. understands nobody's going to believe it anyway. So basically, the chemical weapons are no longer part of the U.S. rationale. The U.S. is saying, don't make any military moves into Idlib. And President Trump is saying hundreds of thousands of lives could be lost if Syria and its allies move to rid the province of these 10,000 militants among a civilian population of 3 million. Now, Trump is trying to wrap this desire to re-escalate the war in Syria in humanitarian concerns, but I'm wondering where his humanitarian concerns were when the U.S. Air Forces were pounding Raqqa to bits last year, causing thousands of civilian deaths. He didn't seem all that worked up about it at that point. Now, there's another story, this is coming out of Fars News, how the U.S. is actually blocking Syrian refugees returning to the army-held regions. Now, a big part of the U.S. propaganda against Assad is, oh, Assad is killing his own people. That's why they're fleeing. They're hoping that we're going to come save them. That's why they went to Europe. A couple of little reality checks here. First of all, every time the Syrian Arab army recaptures part of Syria, the refugees go back in. And they're even coming back from Europe. which sort of undermines this idea that they're running in fear for their lives from Assad. They were running in fear for their lives from the war, from the US-backed terrorists. But apparently the Arabic language Smart News website quoted spokesman Ahmed Al-Abdu saying that U.S. forces detained a delegation of al-Rukban elderly people who wanted to negotiate with the Syrian army to return to their homes. So the U.S. needs these refugees to remain refugees so they can keep the propaganda going. Meanwhile, over in Quneitra, the Syrian army has uncovered a large number of weapons and ammunition, including U.S.-made missiles and Israeli weapons, when they captured one of the terrorist strongholds. And the missiles included U.S.-made tow missiles, Israel-made grenades, and they keep doing this. At this point, it's very obvious who was actually supporting ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And let me do a quick adjustment here. All right, now, the Syrian army apparently already has intelligence units operating behind the terrorist front lines in Idlib. And obviously the terrorists are trying to find them. Apparently they've put up a whole bunch of closed-circuit TV cameras trying to identify them. But a large number of these Syrian intelligence forces have been stationed in several cities and towns held by Tahrir al-Sham Hayat and other terrorist groups in Idlib and other occupied areas in Aleppo. And so it's going to happen. It's just a case of when will it happen and what will the U.S. do. Now, again, Russia has got this fleet of 25 ships gathering near Syria, ostensibly for a military exercise. But more and more people are realizing that what they're trying to do is deter U.S. aggression on Syria. That's what they're really there to do. Now, if it comes to a full-on fight, obviously that Russian fleet is at a disadvantage to the U.S. naval forces in the region, except for the wild card that Russia has these hypersonic sea-skimming anti-ship missiles, which could be a game changer here. Over in Iran, Zarif is saying it's time for Trump to stand aside on Syria, that it's really not his concern anymore. He's got no business being there, which we all know. And Zarif is saying Trump needs to stand aside and allow those who successfully battle terrorism in Syria to do their work. The U.S. doesn't have a good track record confronting radicalism and terrorism. Well, of course they don't, because they were using the terrorists to try and overthrow Assad. That's why every time the U.S. sent in airstrikes, they would miss ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and they'd bomb important critical Syrian infrastructure. Now, here's an interesting little story. The Israeli army has admitted that it's been providing large amounts of cash, weapons, and ammunition to the Syrian rebels in the Golan Heights. They want to hang on to that. And they're calling it, believe it or not, Operation Good Neighbor, and are just sending all of this equipment, weapons, and money to the Syrian rebels in the Golan Heights. Interestingly enough, the Israeli media has had to pull the story. The army's censor has forced newspapers like the Jerusalem Post to remove this report on the Israeli military giving weapons to the Syrians rebels. Apparently, the newspaper's managing editor reported this to Russia Today to get it on out there. I don't think he was very happy at being told to yank the story. Ron Paul has come on out with an article saying basically Syria should be left alone. And he's absolutely right. In fact, all of these nations the U.S. has been invading for the last 18 years should have been left alone. They're not going very well. It's making the U.S. look bad. It is bankrupting our nation. And we're risking a full-on global war that could easily turn nuclear. And in this article, Ron Paul says, remember Aleppo, where the U.S. claimed Assad was planning to mass slaughter once he regained control? And the neocons and the media were out there saying, oh, yes, Assad is just going to commit a mass slaughter against his own people. But even the United Nations has admitted that with Aleppo back in the hands of the Syrian government, hundreds of thousands of Syrians have actually moved back there, which means they know Assad is not going to slaughter them. It was another lie from a government and a corporate media that lies to get you to support their war agenda. And how many more times are you going to have to be lied to before you're willing to stand up and say, I reject your lies? I reject the lies of the government. I reject the lies of the corporate media. I will think for myself from now on. I will make my own choices, my own decisions. I'm a big boy. I can decide who's my enemy is and who my friends are. Now, getting into the realm of more propaganda, and I actually saw this on Fox News yesterday, once again relying on the usual anonymous sources. Iran is being accused of supplying missiles to Hezbollah using a civilian airline, a civilian cargo plane. Well, it's not unusual for civilian cargo planes to be used to fly cargo around. The U.S. does it all the time. There's a CIA proprietary airline, Evergreen Air, that's used to transport all kinds of contraband here. But nobody has actually seen that there are any missiles in these airplanes. The entire case that Iran is doing this is based on the fact that there have been flights between Tehran and Beirut that flew unusual routes. That's it. That's the entire case. They didn't go the normal routes. They went unusual routes. Maybe they were dodging weather. All right. Let's take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
After 6 months, Mike, they got the guys from Russia. Yeah, their photos are all over the place. You know, the Skripals case they solved 6 months later. What a bunch of crap.
I agree.
I mean, Mike, you know what this shows? There's a false flag coming very soon because, and there's more sanctions coming on too. I mean, this, you know, Britain. People don't realize Britain's a dirty trickster. Also, I mean, Britain has a long time to pull this kind of crap off.
Oh yeah.
You know, like, but man, Mike, I mean, did you see they even had like mug shots of them? I'm like, where'd they get these great mugshot photos of these guys? What a fraud. What a setup. You know,
well, they just found them on, I mean, Great Britain is covered with closed-circuit TV cameras. The British people are even more surveilled than the American people are. And they just picked these guys who look like stereotypical Russian villains from movies, and they're parading them around and saying, this is what we think their names are, but they're probably an alias. They don't have any pictures of them actually with the Skripals. Again, they're just picking this stuff out of thin air. But it looks to me like they're trying to find any way they can bash Russia because we are getting close to direct conflict with Russia. And I think the U.S. government and the British government, and probably most of Europe as well, understand their civil populations do not back this policy. And this goes right back to Sun Tzu and the art of war. You have to have a civilian population that believes in the moral rightness of the war so that they will bear the hardships war brings, even to the victorious side.
But it's so sad. Like if you get any of your Novichok on you, make sure you use baby wipes. Like, I mean, come on. You know, hello. And then Novichok's in like a perfume bottle. Are you serious? I mean, come on now. And then isn't Novichok got to be in two separate forms, but it's in a perfume bottle, right? And like, and those other two people who died actually probably died of a heroin overdose, but they're using their, well, the one woman I think died, the one guy died, I think, right? The woman survived or something like that.
No, it was the woman who died, you know, and yeah, she was a known heavy drug user. And as far as the Skripals themselves, I still think they came down with a case of food poisoning. That restaurant that they ate at, when the story first broke, that they had been poisoned, it was reported that several other customers at the restaurant were also hit with the poison. Then that part of the story went away, and it switched to they were poisoned when they touched their doorknob. But considering how deadly Novichok is supposed to be, a lot of survival on this whole thing. It's a complete nonsense story, and we need to go back to this issue. Why would Putin bother? Why would Putin bother? Sergei Skripal, he was out of the game. He was retired. He was not a player. There was no point in doing it. It's just another story they came up with to bash Russia. Nobody's believing it, but they can't back off. They can't say, "All right, you're right. We were lying to you that one time here." They can't do that. So they're stuck maintaining this lie and propping it up. Just like they're stuck maintaining the lies about Saddam's nuclear weapons or Assad's chemical weapons. Once they tell a lie, especially a big one, they have to keep propping it up through government after government after government. That's why they're still trying to prop up the crazed lone nut assassin story for John F. Kennedy. And as we come up on the anniversary of 9/11, I'm sure the online shills are going to be out there either trying to kookify the debate or promote the official government story. And if you really think about it, over the last 200 some odd years, this government has just built up this gigantic load of lies that have to be maintained. And that's got to be costing a lot of time, energy, and manpower to do that, especially in the age of the internet.
But I listened to Theresa May. She's a fraudulent piece of garbage. But, she even says, she mentions Russia's basically, a threat to the current, this is a threat to the current world system. This is what it's about. She said that.
Yes.
It's about their neoliberal world order is that threat.
Yes.
That's the threat, But she, then she brings up Ukraine aggression, right? Because that's the talking points. Russia needs to stop their aggressive behavior. All along, we're arming terrorists and lying to our own people. When is this going to end? You know what I mean? Come on.
It's going to end with the collapse of the U.S. government or a nuclear war. Personally, I favor the former.
That's it, because, Mike, let me tell you, how much more can Russia take? They're absorbing a lot, and they've been patient.
But now Putin is starting to get pressure from his own government. They don't want a war either, but they don't feel Putin is doing enough to protect Russia's interests.
But I think there's another false flag still coming, because these people are all dirty tricksters, Mike. They're experts in it. It's hard to say. They're experts in dirty tricksters, man. But Mike, have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. If there's going to be another false flag, it's going to have to be something really spectacular, because we've already been through, airplanes into skyscrapers, how passé. Been there, seen that already. There's even an article we're going to be referencing a little later in the show. Would the U.S. pull off a nuclear false flag? And the answer is yes, of course they would. From their point of view, they can't back off the war agenda, or the whole economy and the government will collapse. They're stuck. They're stuck on this policy. They don't want to give up. They don't want to quit. They don't want to admit all the bad things that they've done. Now, over in Iraq, which is yet another wonderful country that the U.S. destroyed with its invasion and war, in Basra, there are riots going on. Protesters are burning government buildings over the abysmal services in the southern province. And one of the big issues is that the tap water is as bad down there, or even worse than it is in Flint, Michigan. And apparently the Basra hospitals have been struggling since the middle of last month to treat patients suffering from intestinal and skin diseases. And the hospitals have been so overwhelmed by patients, they've run out of medicines. And they can't provide assistance in thousands and thousands of cases. So that's why they're very angry. And again, every one of these countries the U.S. intrudes into, it's left in ruins. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And as Dustin was mentioning, over in Great Britain, they're trying to fan up the a Skripal case again. And British prosecutors have issued European arrest warrants for 2 Russian nationals identified as Alexander Petrov and Ruslan Boshirov. And then they turn around and say, we'll not be applying to Russia for the extradition of these men, as the Russian constitution does not permit extradition of its own nationals. In other words, Britain can accuse these men and not have to prove it in a court of law, knowing that these men would not be extradited. The only reason for issuing the arrest warrants is to get the media coverage. Pure propaganda, absolute pure propaganda. If you're a prosecutor and you're looking at a crime and there's no way you're actually going to get the suspect into the court, why would you bother going through the work? Is it like a really boring day? Nothing else is going on? Now, Russia is saying that the names that have been published in the British press, they don't know them. They've got no meaning. And further, they're saying basically this is just another attempt to make political capital. And they're saying Theresa May is going to try and use this to bolster her own position. Theresa May is dealing with a lot of domestic dissent, especially around the Brexit issue. So she needs an enemy. Oh, we've got Russia. We must unite behind the Prime Minister to save us all from those evil Russians who are coming into this country and poisoning people for no gosh darn good reason whatsoever. Meanwhile, the United States is saying they will stand together with Great Britain to hold Russia responsible for the Skripal case. This is from the U.S. Ambassador to Britain, Woody Johnson. Oh boy. If at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again. Over in Ukraine, the United States is drastically expanding their military assistance to Kiev. The National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2019 allocated $250 million in military assistance to Ukraine, including lethal arms. Now, according to a key Kiev military source named Karapinka on Ukrainian television last month, the country's forces are planning to attack Donbas at an unspecified time ahead. And the Trump regime is basically aiding this escalation. And that'll bring NATO right up to the border with Russia. So who's being the aggressor here? Who's being the aggressor? Look at the U.S. over the last 18 years. You know who the aggressor nation is here. Over at South Front, they've got an article that's asking a key question. Who is instigating a hot war between NATO and Russia? And they're pointing out some facts that need to be sort of glued together. Over the past few months, NATO member states have greatly increased their pressure on Russia. The Euro-Atlantic establishment is strengthening the image of Russia as a fierce enemy, which is really nice to have to justify your own reckless foreign and domestic policy, not to mention increased spending to the defense contractors. And obviously, relations between the two sides have deteriorated, and it's undermined all the problem-solving mechanisms like the UN Security Council or the OPCW. When you take out all the peaceful ways of resolving situations, all that's left is conflict. And there is this growing military escalation between NATO and Russia in the Black Sea and in Eastern Europe. On August 23rd, British jets launched from the Mihail Koganachino Air Base near the Romanian city of Constanta, intercepted a Russian BE-12 maritime patrol aircraft heading over the Black Sea from Crimea. Earlier on August 21st, 2 British Typhoon jets from the same airbase scrambled to intercept 2 alleged Russian Sukhoi 30 flanker aircraft launched from Crimea. And on August 13th, British jets intercepted Russian Sukhoi 24 warplanes over the Black Sea. Now, the thing is that none of these Russian aircraft were anywhere near NATO airspace. These warplanes were launched out over the Black Sea to basically harass these Russian airplanes and make it look like, the Russians are being aggressive. No, the Russians aren't the ones being aggressive. Then you have all these NATO exercises taking place in Poland and the Baltic states in close proximity to the Russian border. Now, I know the defense contractors are thinking we can keep this war cold and just make a lot of money. And we can go on building junk weapons and get paid lots of money for it. But this war could very easily go hot. It could go hot in Syria. And again, my concern is with these high-speed computerized weapon systems, something disastrous could happen before any human being could possibly intervene to stop it. That's what happened when the USS Vincennes shot down that Iranian passenger jet. The system simply acted too quickly. They couldn't stop it. I suspect the same thing was behind the accidental shoot-down of TWA 800. Anyway, we're going to take another break here for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, over in Israel, the mayor of Jerusalem is now vowing to kick out the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, and saying that this will support Israeli sovereignty and unity of Jerusalem. And he also issued an appeal to increase the Israelization of East Jerusalem. Now, you need to go on back and look at the original partition plan, where the United Nations declared Jerusalem to be a shared international city. It's basically, there are 4 different areas, one for the Jewish faith, one for the Muslim faith, one for the Orthodox, and one for the Christians. Israel basically wants it all. So Mayor Barkatz is going to shut down the UN Relief and Works Agency in Jerusalem, and basically accused the UN of running schools that promote incitement against Israel through its education system. Israel loves that word, incitement. If you say bad things about us, that's incitement. Well, if you don't want us to say bad things about you, don't do bad things. Oh, no, we got to do the bad things. Just you don't talk about it. That's incitement here. Okay, apparently Israel has closed yet another Gaza-Israel crossing. There was a protest, and apparently Israeli soldiers opened fire on the demonstrators at the Beit Hanun Eraz crossing. The U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, is basically out there saying, you know, there's no need to evacuate the illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank. There's just no need. Yeah, you know, yes, they're illegal, and yes, they're racist because they're Jews only, but there's no need to evacuate the illegal settlements. I'm sure the United Nations would have something different to say. Then he goes on to basically say that Jerusalem was made Israel's capital under God's direction 3,000 years ago. Boy, they're laying it on with a trowel, aren't they, here? Unfortunately, over in Great Britain, this big anti-Semitism Jeremy Corbyn smear campaign has apparently succeeded. The goal there was to get the Labour Party to adopt that full International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, which, among other things, says that criticism of the government of Israel is anti-Semitic, which is a dangerous conflation. And the Labour Party voted to adopt it. So they caved in. They gave into it. This is a dangerous situation when you're not allowed to criticize a government that behaves badly. You're living in a dictatorship. That's it. Now, apparently, a bunch of scientists who were invited to Ariel University in the occupied West Bank have signed a global letter opposing this physics conference because the university, again, is in an illegal settlement. Politicians may cave, but ordinary citizens are showing some spine here. Now, a while back, Al Jazeera produced a documentary called The Lobby UK, and it was about the influence of the Israel lobby over the British government, which we just saw yet another demonstration of with that ridiculous anti-Semitism definition. And it caused quite a stir in Great Britain. And everybody was screaming, oh, you're being anti-Semitic, you hate the Jews, Holocaust, Hitler, Nazis, and all the rest of the stuff. And Al Jazeera had produced a second one for the United States. And they came under intense pressure from Israel and the United States to not release it, thereby proving that the Israel lobby does, in fact, have a tremendous amount of power and influence in the world. That's the bad news. The good news is it's leaked out. And at least one journalist says they've seen the whole thing. Electronic Intifada is releasing bits and pieces of it, but apparently the entire documentary has leaked out. So it's only a matter of time before we see it here on the web. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, it's been a while since I've called in, but this thing with the Labour Party in Britain,
yes,
and all that is just, and 25 Russian ships and U.S. moving the goal line back and forth about what we would go to war for in Syria. What we would go to war for, and why we were there is Israel. There's no other reason. And when you put together, Mike, the fact that the biggest donors to the Democratic Party are all basically Israeli first or Jews. The biggest donors to all the Republicans are basically Israeli first or Jews. When you look at who controls the network, when you look at we're almost in a shooting war when we have nothing really. Who cares what happens in Syria, right?
Yes.
You know, when they can manipulate 26 states saying you can't get a government contract, or, as in South Carolina, it's a criminal offense to criticize Israel. It's now a criminal, or the definition of criticizing Israel now is not accepted in the home of the Magna Carta in Britain. With this new thing with the Al Jazeera thing leaking out the paper or the documentary about what's going on in the United States. I've seen the clips, I'm sure you have too, about Project Canary, where they're taking people who believe in the BDS movement and they're putting their name on a database, and they're actively subverting these guys on Facebook and LinkedIn and making it almost impossible for them to get a job in our country.
Yes. Now,
you know, they used to say back in the days, and make fun of it, that when I used to bring this stuff up to my brother, and I would say, this is directed, clearly this is all directed from Israel, or most of it anyway. And I used to bring it up, and my brother would say, like in a faux German voice, international Jewish conspiracy. Like, you know, but what else are you going to call this? What else is there when there's a foreign government that's circumscribing our freedom of speech, controlling our foreign policy, controlling what we see, hear, and read on the radio, TV, and the newspapers, that's censoring stuff that can censor censors free speech in multiple countries, that controls our foreign policy. What else do you call that? And I submit to you that if we don't take care of this, they're going to take care of us. We just can't go on, though. I mean, $6 trillion in the Iraqi war. By the way, who's drumbeating to get us to go to war in Iran? Same thing.
Yes.
I mean, they are a toxic poison. And I'm not talking about everybody. There are people who call to your show I have immense respect for that are Jewish. But I'm talking about the Israeli firster, Zionist, nutso Nazis. And it's making me sick. And you know what? There's going to be a backlash on this. It's going to hurt everybody. And the Jewish community better get a hold on this, because it will come back on them.
Yes.
For not having stopped it.
That's the real danger here. Where, I mean, you know, it's the actions of Israel's government that are the real threat to the safety of the world's Jewish people, because the anger is building and it's continuing to build. And, you know, ultimately Israel wants to turn the entire world into the equivalent of Gaza, and just get us all shoved off to one side in these little open-air prisons so they don't have to worry about us anymore.
And Mike, it's not just the government of Israel; it's the people in the United States and Britain and all over the world. Their fifth columnists, and there's no other way to say it. Their fifth columnists that subvert our rights, our questions of war and peace in the United States and all that. It's them too. So this is bigger than just Israel. This is a Jewish community problem, and it's not the entire Jewish community, but it's wider than just the government of Israel. The government of Israel takes advantage of that attitude.
Yeah, they do, and not just in the Jewish community. They have masterfully exploited the Christian Zionists too. They're caught up with this idea that if they help Israel set the planet on fire, that Jesus is going to come down and invite them all up to the big house. And I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, they're idiots. It's almost laughable even. You're right to refer to them, but it's almost laughable that they're even given any credence at all. But the Israeli lobby, the fifth column, you better not laugh at that, because they will get you personally, they will get our country, they'll get everybody that stands in their way.
Yeah, it's getting intense. I am surprised that the Tories caved on that issue. Because you've got academics and civil rights people everywhere saying this is ridiculous to conflate criticism of a government with race hate. And as I keep saying, that's like trying to say that the only reason people complain about the Nazis is they hate the German people.
Well, this is bigger than just Israel, but Israel's the center of it.
Yes.
I mean, it's banking. I mean, look, they're everywhere. Banking, the media, the Federal Reserve, the Rothschilds, the Warburgs, Michael Eisner, you name it. They're everywhere. George Soros, you guys like a James Bond villain, all over the world, fomenting revolutions.
Yep.
Undercutting people's rights. I mean, what other community has that? Any suggestions? Anybody raising their hand?
Nope.
Is there another community you could even remotely compare? Class? Anybody?
Yeah, Bueller. You're absolutely right. It does seem like a tremendous amount of war and predation is coming out of this one part of the world, and nobody is able to stand up to them, not even the United States of America. Basically, Israel understands a reality. Politicians in every single country will sell their mother for $1, and they've got the dollars to buy them. And that's really what it all comes down to.
Right. The old Rothschild quote that you had, you show me, I care not who makes the, what's that quote? I care not who makes the laws, or...
Yeah, allow me to control a nation's currency, and I care not who makes the laws.
Well, there you have it, people. Who makes our currency? Who can't be audited?
They don't make the currency. They create it out of thin air. They've been running this private central banking scam for 300 years, and that's what has made the world slaves to them.
And by the way, how can democracy possibly coexist with an institution that can create money out of thin air, enough money, of course, to buy off any politician or anybody anywhere in 2 seconds, and can't ever be audited? And then if you criticize them, it's anti-Semitism.
Yes. That'll be coming here, too. That will be coming here, too.
Yep. Mike, I'm sorry. I promise I was getting too vitriolic, but this new thing with Britain and the fact we're about to go to war with Russia, for no good reason at all, except for Israel and its fifth column, got me to call in.
Israel is a major player, but there were other reasons for the war with Russia having to do with the New World, the New World Order. All right, so thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And we're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I think you got a little bit wrong. I think they think that that Jesus is going to come back and rule over what would be a radioactive planet. That he would come and sit in a throne in Jerusalem, and he'd rule over it. They don't say it, but that's what it would come down to, a radioactive planet. But anyway, what I wanted to say is this. People should go to bed at night and thank God that we have Vladimir Putin, that Vladimir Putin's in charge of Russia. Because if you had a really hard liner, like this guy, I think his name is Yerensky, something like that, we probably would have blown each other up already. He's trying his best. I think he understands that he's dealing with insane people. He's dealing with a president of the United States now who's not in total control.
Yep.
In other words, it's a country in turmoil, and he's trying his best to avoid World War III. But you can only try so hard. At this point, everything seems to be coming to a head. In Syria, you got a large Russian fleet in the Mediterranean. You got U.S. and NATO forces now approaching. All kinds of threats are being made. And on top of that, now the Ukraine, you had that Ukrainian, the People's Republic of Donetsk. You
Yes.
had the leader was assassinated, and Poroshenko is making more and more noise. And to make matters worse, you got U.S. troops now there as advisors. Now, I think the Ukraine is probably not as much of a danger as the Middle East, because first of all, Ukraine is not part of NATO, and I think other than making a lot of noise, if Russia decided to incorporate the eastern part of Ukraine, because that's what the people there want, I think all they would do is make noise. However, as far as the Middle East goes, that's a different story. Another thing, too, I don't think NATO really thinks they could beat Russia that close to its border. I think they know
but
that
they could tie up a lot of Russian assets, and that may be what they're thinking of doing, is to try and get Russia caught in a multi-front war to wear them down through attrition. Because that's really what did in Nazi Germany, was they were fighting on two fronts. One against Russia and one against the rest of Europe.
Yeah, but hello?
Yeah, hello?
Still there, Mike?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, she's still there. The thing is this. Russia would have all the advantage over there because this is on your border. And the loss to NATO would be incredible. I mean, we're probably talking hundreds of thousands of NATO. This is, by the way, it doesn't go nuclear at this point. They're probably talking about hundreds of thousands of NATO troops getting wiped out. And that would be mostly U.S. troops because that's where we got the biggest contingent in NATO. And I really think that the NATO generals understand it. I think especially the Germans. Nobody else, I think the Germans, because they understand what happened to them, to the German army when came to Russia. And the other thing, too, the longer a war goes, if it did go into any length of time, Russia tends to get stronger. We've seen that in World War II. We've seen that with Napoleon. So it's not that they'll be weaker either. But I don't think they're going to. I don't think that's where they're going to make where NATO would make the move. I think it more likely would be in the Middle East, maybe with a naval battle or something like that. Especially now with Israel. Like I said yesterday, Israel is like the guy at a gas station. The gas station just had a big leak, gasoline all over the place, and he runs around with matches. That's what Israel is like right now. They're starting stuff. They're instigating. They're a dirty, nasty little country. And I told you before, I'm of Jewish heritage. I don't care. I'm an American, and
Okay.
Israel is.
Mark, I got to let you go. Mark, I got to let you go. We got to take a commercial break, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And over in the Korean Peninsula, a South Korean envoy has visited North Korea to try and get the nuclear talks back on track. And this is an envoy directly from President Moon Jae-in. And he's in North Korea right now trying to break the deadlock in the talks between North Korea and the United States over the dismantling of the North's nuclear weapons program. Now, the stalemate here, and I speculated this was likely to happen, is Kim Jong-un was expecting he would make a concession, the U.S. would make a concession, Kim Jong-un would make a concession, the U.S. would make a concession. And it didn't work out that way. Kim Jong-un took down the missile test stand. He's closed the nuclear test site. He sent back the remains of U.S. soldiers lost when the Korean War got started. He's been allowing people separated by the DMZ to reunite, even if only briefly. And he and Moon Jae-in are talking about opening up all the roads and railroad bridges across the DMZ by the end of the month, although obviously the U.S. Army Command in the South has other ideas about that. And Kim Jong-un is waiting to see something come back from the United States, and it hasn't happened. The U.S. is still having all those naval drills off the Korean coast, which are making North Korea very, very nervous. And the U.S. attitude seems to be, you give us everything we want first, and then maybe we'll do something nice for you. And that's not going to fly in the Asian mindset here. So the envoy's up there trying to get things going. But again, I think what Kim Jong-un and Moon Jae-in's ultimate plan is reunification, at which point North Korea won't need to have nuclear weapons to defend itself against the United States. And of course, South Korea will then say, well, we don't need U.S. military forces in South Korea. We're all one country again. We're all going to be friends again. And the China One Belt, One Road project will basically be able to come right on down through North Korea into South Korea to all those wonderful manufacturing facilities. All sorts of things the U.S. does not want to see happen. Okay, I mentioned this when I was talking with an earlier caller. This is coming out of IntelliHub, and it's asking point blank, is a nuclear false flag being planned for America? And I would have to say you cannot rule out that possibility, because Americans are now skeptical. They do not trust the corporate media. They do not trust the government. And if there's going to be a false flag, it's got to be so big and so shocking that Americans will just be too scared to take the chance it's not real. So it's going to be something a lot bigger than a couple of airplanes into a couple of buildings. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back with hour number 2. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Let's turn to the domestic politics now. And the Kavanaugh hearings are still going on. I think they're in recess right now because Fox has moved on to some other stuff. And as it was the case earlier in the week, it's rancorous. There were more protests inside the hearing room. And apparently today, the big focus of the Democrats has been on attacking Kavanaugh for his views on the Second Amendment. And what's really been interesting is the Democrats kind of hoisted with their own petard a little bit, because one of them came on out and said, well, if Trump makes you a Supreme Court judge, are you going to be loyal to him, or are you going to be loyal to America? And Kavanaugh actually had in his pocket a little pocket constitution, and he pulled it out and he said, this is what I'm loyal to. I'm loyal to the Constitution of the United States of America. Well, that set the stage, because obviously part of the Constitution is the right to keep and bear arms. And the Democrats just went on the attack there. Kamala Harris is out there saying that Kavanaugh really is not being fair to the parents of Parkland, by clinging to this Second Amendment thing. And apparently they set up a media event where the father of one of the victims of Parkland shook Kavanaugh's hand, and apparently this was all set up by Feinstein to try and trip him up into some kind of a media bite that could be used to damage him. So it really is very intense, but it's all for show, because under the current Constitution, or rather arrangement of the Congress, Kavanaugh's confirmation is pretty much a done deal. But the Democrats are out there trying to make as much hay as they can here. Apparently, left-wing AstroTurf group Mainers for Accountable Leadership released a video begging Senator Susan Collins to vote against Kavanaugh's appointment to the Supreme Court, saying that you're voting to kill me. The liberals are literally claiming that a vote for Kavanaugh is a vote for their death. I mean, that's the shark. That is the shark out there. That's ridiculous here. Here's where it gets interesting. Adam Schindler interviewed 3 Texas doctors who were outside the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings who said they witnessed cash being given to protesters who disrupted the event. And somebody got pictures of it, of them literally being handed these, little folded packets of cash. It's all theater. It's all organized here. Now, the other hearings that are going on that are not getting a lot of coverage on corporate media are the hearings with Facebook, Twitter, and Google. And at one point, the hearings sort of spun off into protecting America from foreign meddling, but eventually they came on back to this issue about why these corporate media giants are practicing censorship. And Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg said that really Facebook works to censor content they deem to be false, including by showing users alternative facts. Well, who gave Facebook the godlike wisdom to know what is false and what is not? And the answer is nobody. Facebook is imposing its own political bias on the traffic on their site. Now, Alex Jones is up there in Washington, D.C., and he basically got into the, or at least the hallway outside the Facebook and Twitter hearing, and he basically got into the face of a lot of these people who are pro-censorship here. And he slammed the media for supporting censorship, which is what they're actually doing. And it's kind of ridiculous to see the corporate media people out there saying, well, we're champions of freedom of speech, but that means we've got to silence the independent media. How does silencing independent media promote freedom of speech? Now, Alex Jones got into Marco Rubio's face during the interview. There was a video of it. I don't think it was probably the best presentation Alex could have done. I don't think he looked as good as he would like. Marco Rubio, in turn, is urging the media to stop giving Alex Jones the spotlight, to stop reporting on him, to stop giving him airtime. And he followed up by saying, we're making crazy people superstars. Marco, your bias is showing. I liked you better when you were talking about invading Venezuela. Now, there's still continued talk about a massive class action lawsuit versus all of these leftist social media corporations. And I think lawyers are probably studying under what grounds the lawsuit could move forward. But if it happens, I'm certainly going to join. I absolutely am going to join. Meanwhile, apparently VK is really taking off, and so is DuckDuckGo. So these social media corporations just may not be the powerhouse that much longer. People don't want to be told what to think. They don't want to be controlled. The reason people go to the internet is to find out facts for themselves. And when they find out that Facebook and Google and Twitter are now filtering the news as much as the corporate media does, they're going to drop them the way they drop the corporate media. Look at CNN's numbers if you want to know the future of Facebook. All right, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. As you know, Bob Woodward is out with a new book about the Trump White House. It's very negative, and some of the claims being made in there include that Trump wanted to assassinate Assad following that last chemical attack. And apparently Woodward is claiming that his aides are hiding documents from Trump to prevent a third world war. Now, Donald Trump has already come on out with a tweet quoting Secretary of Defense James Mattis saying, no, he never said any of the things Woodward has in the books, in the book there. And apparently, what's going on here, there's two things going on here. And by the way, Trump is already out there saying, no, he didn't say he wanted to assassinate Assad, which may not mean anything one way or the other. But let me tell you what I think is going on here. Woodward is exploiting his Watergate reputation here. Oh, it's Bob Woodward. The book must be true. And unfortunately, nowhere in the book does he question just who did the supposed chemical attack, which tells us right there he's not being the investigative journalist he once was. Now, it's long been rumored that Woodward is connected with the CIA and that he was connected with the CIA back during the Watergate situation. So a little bit of reality that you may have overlooked in the rush to see Richard Nixon come crashing down. Because Richard Nixon, like Donald Trump, became a major, major threat to the military-industrial complex. Forget about Watergate, forget about all the rest of that stuff. Remember the two things Nixon did that would have really angered the deep state. He went to China, starting the normalization of relations with the People's Republic to bring about commerce. Oh, good. We don't need to have a Cold War against China anymore. Look at how much money we're going to save over at the Pentagon. And then he traveled to the Soviet Union and signed agreements that contained the results of the first Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty talks, SALT I. And that began the period of détente. And that's the reason, that's the real reason Nixon was brought down. They wanted warrior presidents, presidents who'll take all the money they can from you and give it to the defense contractors. That's what's driving all of this. And Eisenhower did warn us. Eisenhower did warn us. Okay, Ken in Fort Worth. Aloha, Ken. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, howdy. Somebody took his truck and rammed Fox 4 TV downtown Dallas.
Yeah, I saw that. The shouting treason, treason. He did it twice, so it wasn't an accident.
Okay. Hey, another thing is, are you catching this plane come into JFK with 100 people with temperatures? 100 degrees? 100 of them? Okay, so you're getting all that.
Yeah, I'm going to take a guess, given the amount of travel time versus incubation periods, I'm going to say that probably it was a case of food poisoning on the in-flight meal. That's
possible in an airplane like that.
Yeah.
Unless there's something we just don't know about. I'm going.
Okay, well, I mean, many, many years ago, I had a meal on an airline flight that made me very, very ill, and I ran a very high fever, and they didn't divert or anything. I just waited it out, and it went away here. Okay, back to the phones here. Tom in Connecticut. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, you just brought up that retort from Kavanaugh about he supports the Constitution, the Second Amendment, and gun rights and all that. Did you see the NPR piece that they investigated supposedly 235 school shootings and found that there were only 11 confirmed?
It was actually more than that. Basically, we ran that story yesterday where NPR wanted to basically take these shocking statistics and make a big story out of it. So they called all the schools that were listed in this report, and they found that 2/3 of them hadn't happened. It was just being made up again to push the gun grabber agenda.
It's remarkable. And what would have happened if the NRA did their own independent study and came out with these numbers?
Oh, the media would have said they're lying. It's the NRA. They're evil people. They love guns and so forth.
That NPR took it upon itself. Now, I don't know if this independent people that investigated this, if this kind of backfired on them and they weren't prepared for these results. But it's pretty remarkable that they would come out with this kind of thing.
Well, I think they grudgingly had to say that, yes, this is what they found. I mean, if it was a small discrepancy, like maybe 10 schools said that there hadn't been a shooting, that would be one thing. But when 2/3 of all the schools listed turn out not to have had a shooting incident, NPR was showing a certain amount of journalistic responsibility, coming on out and saying, look, this is what we found.
Well, it's great because this was the drumbeat however long ago, there's almost a school shooting every day. We have to do this. We have to do that. And I wonder how many people heard this and it resonated with them in any way, like, oh, maybe the stuff we're hearing isn't really that accurate, even from a source like NPR.
Well, did you see the video of the governor of Virginia saying that we lose 93 million Americans to gun violence every day?
Oh, my God.
With a straight face. With a straight face.
People, they have no shame. They have no, reset button. They just go out there and babble this stuff out there, and people take it whole cloth and have no discernment, which is horrible. I mean, it's seemingly the state of things these days.
It is. Here's the thing. The lies are becoming more and more extreme in order to grab people's attention. Because if you're telling the same kind of lies over and over again, people tune out, they get bored. But as the lies become more and more extreme, they call attention to themselves. I mean, this thing about 93 million Americans get killed every day by guns, that one just went all over the internet. People are just saying, this is absurd. And yes, we are being lied to. That's how government controls us. They lie to us. They trick us. They deceive us. They hoax us.
There was also a very interesting thing that I ran across. I mean, I've ran across it for a while. Catherine Austin Fitz, you're probably aware of her, the 21 trillion missing dollars. And this fellow Kirby, who runs a precious metals kind of thing and analytics.
Yes.
It's mind-boggling, the scenario he paints out when he pointed to the fact that when Donald Trump went in to meet Obama, it was only supposed to be for X minutes. And when he came out, he looked almost ashen. He goes, well, maybe Obama told him this whole Ponzi scheme of floating all these dollars out there and how these numbers really come out, and this is the real story that he might not have been aware of. And it's just staggering to imagine the float of whatever fiat currency we put out there around the world, that if it ever came home to roost, the consequences of that would be just horrific.
Well, we've already been through that once before, when France tried to redeem their Federal Reserve notes for gold under Bretton Woods, and Nixon had to slam the gold convertibility window closed, which technically ended.
Well, Germany wanted the Federal Reserve audited for their gold not too long ago, 4 or 5 years ago.
Actually, they did, because they wanted their gold back, and the New York Federal Reserve said, "Oh no, we can't do that. It's going to be years before we can get it back to you." And Germany said, "Well, can we at least come on in and verify that it's still there?" And the Federal Reserve said, "No, we can't do that." And eventually, the Federal Reserve did send some gold back to Germany, but it was not the original.
Yes, a modest. It was 10%, something horrible.
Yeah, it wasn't even as pure, and it wasn't the same bars. And a gold depository is like a safety deposit box. The object that you put in is the object you're supposed to be able to take out, and that's not what happened. And it was a real big stink, and now a lot of countries are trying to get their gold back from the United States, and they're having a lot of trouble getting it. We covered this in America's Book of Secrets.
Well, I hope that if only 10% of the things we think can go bad, it's going to be really bad.
It's going to be bad. I'm afraid we're going to have to go through a world war.
Well, on that lovely note, sir, I will let you go for today.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? We lost Al. Okay. Story coming out of informationliberation.com. Apparently resistance icons, they're still calling themselves the resistance. Those of us who we still can't get over the fact that we lost in 2016. We're the resistance here. So Gary Kasparov and Bill Kristol basically admitted they fantasize about holding show trials for supporters of President Donald Trump. Not Trump himself, for his supporters. They want to put him on trial. I mean, this is getting as ridiculous as, when they grab bookkeepers and accountants who worked at Auschwitz and try them as war criminals. It's really out there. Now, I want to go back to a topic that we've touched on before, but it's a situation that really does need to be looked at a little more closely. And the fact that it is not being looked at closely, I think, tells us a very great deal. And this is, of course, Imran Awan and the Awan brothers, who ran information technology for the Democratic National Committee and for members of Congress, and appeared to have been running an espionage operation. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz tried to cover for them. And there's been no real investigation. Awan was arrested over a bank fraud issue. So how badly penetrated was the U.S. Congress? That's the question. And was this connected with a possible espionage operation being run out of the State Department by Hillary Clinton? Were they just selling it all over the world to anybody who would buy it? Or were they collecting information for blackmail? Was that why Debbie Wasserman Schultz was protecting the Awan brothers? They found something on her. We don't know, but we do need to find out. But it's amazing things. They're so obsessed about getting Donald Trump, and they will not look at the real crimes. We now know for a fact Hillary Clinton's private email server had indeed been hacked, not by Russia, but by China. And they inserted a little piece of code that sent China a copy of every email going in or out of that server. And during that period of time, China was identifying, arresting, and executing U.S. agents inside China. I think we have a right to know if, in point of fact, Hillary's recklessness with her private email server is the reason those assets are dead. But nobody's investigating that. Nobody's looking at that. I don't think they don't want to find what's there. They're afraid of what they're going to find. So let's go back and let's get Donald Trump. Anyway. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about domestic politics. And down in Georgia, there is a lawsuit that is going through the court system right now involving paper ballots. Now, Georgia and 4 other states do not use paper ballots as a backup for the electronic voting machines. In those 4 states, what the electronic machines say the results are, the results are. There's no way to double check. There's no way to verify. It's completely opaque. Trust the machine, they said. Now, there is a move to mandate extra security measures across the nation. But in Georgia, the Secretary of State, Brian Kemp, is saying he can't make the change before the upcoming November 6th election. And Kemp says he understands the system needs updating. It's a 15-year-old system. And a previous investigation in 2017 showed it was in serious jeopardy. Mistakes were being made, but nothing was done. And here's the kicker. Several databases with vital information that could have assisted in the remedy went missing. Our election system is a disgrace here. Okay, we already had the caller call in about that guy ramming his truck into the Fox affiliate there. A little bit of good news. Judge Roy Moore has filed a lawsuit against Sacha Baron Cohen, Showtime, and CBS over his treatment by Sacha in this program that he's doing, which I can't even remember what that's actually being called. But apparently, Judge Roy Moore and his wife were lured to Washington, D.C., where he was falsely led by Cohen to believe he would be interviewed and receive an award for his staunch support of Israel. And the occasion was to honor and commemorate the founding of the Jewish state on its 70th anniversary. And instead, Moore was maliciously defamed and subjected, along with his wife, to intentional emotional distress. So Cohen is being sued for basically fraudulently representing what the meeting was all about and the emotional distress. And I'm glad the judge is suing him, because I don't like the concept of the show where Sacha Baron Cohen is just going on in, he's misrepresenting himself to people and just trying to get them to embarrass themselves. I don't like that kind of programming. I have no intention of watching it. It's probably why I can't remember the name of it. Something America, I think. All right, let's talk about the economic news. There's a lot of stuff going on there. Russia China, Japan, Turkey, Iran, and Iraq have all dropped the US dollar in bilateral trade. The de-dollarization of the world is continuing apace. And over in Russia, Sergei Lavrov, their foreign minister, it lays it right on out. The US dollar is Washington's pressure lever to punish countries. They've weaponized it. And in an interview with Russian Channel 1, Lavrov said Washington immediately stopped servicing any banking operations in dollars in relation to both the country that they want to punish and any countries that continue relations with it. And Lavrov said for decades everyone hoped that the United States would scrupulously fulfill its duties as the issuer of the world's main reserve currency, but that didn't happen. The U.S. government weaponized it. And that's why the rest of the world is dropping the dollar. And that is a major problem for the United States. We don't export a lot of manufactured goods. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. The only thing that is bringing any new wealth into our economic system on any kind of a scale is having the rest of the world using Federal Reserve notes for cross-border trade and banking, for which they pay a small fee. Or they will send us manufactured goods and agricultural produce for essentially boxes of ink and paper. But that's coming to an end. And that's a big part of what all these wars are about, dragging the world back to Bretton Woods. The United States is trying to take the world back to the 1950s. Hey, look, we got a new Cold War, everything. Down in South Africa, they're slipping into a recession despite their reforms, and apparently the major drop is in agriculture because all the farmers have quit farming because they know their farms are about to be taken away from them. So why should they be out there working the farm fields? Because they're not going to be there for the harvest. Same thing happened in Zimbabwe. All right, we're going to take a break here for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to take a phone call from Francis in Montreal. Aloha, Francis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Aloha, Mike. I wanted to talk a bit about the Canada-U.S. NAFTA negotiations, and that's a pretty boring subject. Except there's a kind of a funny twist that's developed in it that the mainstream media has got to be deliberately ignoring. And it speaks volumes about like how business is done in North America and how the media and politicians politely cover up inconvenient facts.
Yes.
Now, in the negotiations, there's a sticking point. And in Canada, there's a lot of talk about this, even in the U.S. press. The sticking point is Canadian dairy products, because Canadian dairy products have a over 300% tariff against American dairy products. And nobody wants to touch this. It's gotten to the point where the whole trade deal with the U.S. could collapse and just destroy Canada's auto manufacturing sector, which is really substantial, thousands and thousands of jobs in Ontario. And yet Trudeau and even Harper, all the parties, the Liberals, the NDP, and the Conservatives, they won't yield on that point. And when they do talk about this, they say, well, it's those gosh darn Quebec dairy farmers. They wield an unbalanced political power. Somehow it's just a mystery. Oh, those nasty Quebec dairy farmers. So I was thinking about this and falling. Something was bothering me. Like, there's something wrong with this story, because basically what government cares about farmers? I mean, this is the last thing. Farmers can go bust. Nobody cares. But there's a secret here, and a friend of mine who is a wealthy guy from Montreal clued me in. In fact, my friend, claim to be related to these people. Who controls the dairy products in Quebec? In fact, who controls dairy across Canada? It's a corporation. They've gone to all the big farmers, collectors, and bought them up.
Mm-hmm.
And they bought the Dairyland in BC and in Nielsen's in Ontario. It's in Quebec. It's Saputo Incorporated. Saputo. And what, you may ask, is Saputo? Why, it's a heartwarming tale of a little humble immigrant coming from southern Italy, and in 1957, he takes $500 and an old bicycle for deliveries, and he knows how to make cheese, and he starts making cheese, and then his intrepid son, he makes the company grow, and now it's a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate of dairy products across Canada, in Wisconsin, in Argentina. This is a big company, right?
Okay, Francis, can you kind of speed this up and get to the point?
Yeah, the point is this. That's funny, so I did my research just because I didn't want to do rumors. You look at what Saputo is. Vito Rizzuto, the mafia chieftain who's dead now of Montreal, one of his lieutenants testified to Italian police that Saputo is a front for mafia money. And if you go into the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Globe and Mail, like even when they're starting, the Bonanno clan of New York are all over this company, right?
Yeah.
And if you do Saputo and mafia, you'll see all this stuff. No, everybody's lying to the Canadian public about this, and the politicians and the press are all covering this up. They don't want anybody to know that this mafia client, this mafia front company is prepared to sink, basically throw Canada into a major recession and have 6,000 people laid off from good paying jobs just for what they want. And that's how the business is done in this country.
Well, this country too. Look at things like Enron. Yeah. Everybody still worships at the altar of Adam Smith, that somehow being personally greedy advances the system as a whole. But Nobel Prize winning mathematician John Nash actually proved that was wrong, that if you weren't maintaining an overview, the system could lock up, which is what's starting to happen down here. In any event, I disagree with this idea of just going to economic war with the rest of the world as a whole. And again, every time I've been to Canada, I loved it. It's clean. The people are wonderful and polite. And I don't understand why Trump basically has thrown Canada out of NAFTA. He's made a deal with Mexico. He's come out with that ridiculous statement that it's not politically necessary to have a trade deal with Canada. And it's just going to cause all kinds of friction.
Yeah, but the thing is this, is that if you actually look at the deal that Trump cut with Mexico, it's the deal from heaven for Canada, because the main sticking point that was damaging us the most economically was the fact that they pay $3 an hour to auto workers in Mexico. And Trump came in with his deal in Mexico and says, no, you're going to pay a minimum wage of $16 an hour to your auto workers in Mexico. And the Mexicans said, okay, sure. And even the incoming socialists said, yeah, great, sure. And so we should be just overjoyed and just jump on this deal. But we can't, because the milk industry is run by the mafia, and they are prepared to sink the whole deal. And Trump knows that.
Francis, you keep flipping back and forth between auto workers and milk, and I still don't understand the point you're trying to make. So I need you to sum up.
The point is that the auto section of the economy in Canada is vast compared to the milk industry. But the milk industry is determining this deal. They want 300% tariffs. And that should be just swept away, because Canadians pay more than twice as much for dairy products as Americans do. Nobody wants to do that. But the point is that Trump, he's dealt with the mafia all his life in New York City. He knows the game, and he's looking at us, and he sees clearly that the whole Canadian economy right now is teetering on the edge of a recession just because the mafia-controlled dairy industry is screwing all of us. That's the point.
Okay. Well,
Thank you.
we have, even in this country, we have a problem where organized crime, they do go into legitimate businesses, and they do tend to run them with the same kind of a mindset that they ran their criminal enterprises. Anyway, Francis, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and I'm going to get on back to some news here. Okay. Over at General Motors, their sales plunged 13%. The August passenger car sales just absolutely collapsed. And I'm sure if you're like me and you're watching a little bit of TV, you're seeing all these commercials out there. Oh, we're making great deals for the cars. And they are great deals. If people actually had money, this would be a wonderful time to buy a car. But people don't have money, and they don't want to go further into debt. Okay, let's take another phone call from Dave in Missouri. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Sorry, Mike, I just dropped my phone, but wow, what a great caller the dude was from Canada. Mm-hmm. And he pointed, it's big on my heart because I fought Walmart and the export of our industries, the demoralization and impoverishment of our hometowns, probably as much as any man ever did, right? Mm-hmm. And so, to make those points, okay, so I don't get the Canada thing either, but yeah, we have got to preserve the living wages and opportunity for our own citizens. Now, Walmart, Hillary, the Bushes, the whole thing has always been designed to make the Walton family richer, the corporations superior to those of us, and let's get this, Mike. Those are the non-productive people, right? I mean, well, what have they done for the benefit of anybody? I mean, I guess you could go to Bentonville and Rogers, Arkansas, and you can see where they built a few things. I took them to the Supreme Court a couple of years ago trying to save downtown Springfield, Missouri. They've done nothing outside their immediate territory. They are predatory. They are, they try to lord their dominance and their wealth over people, and they contribute nothing back. Now, that's treason, man. I mean, I don't care who you. Okay, so maybe you could buy the government, right? And they have.
Yes.
Dude, at some point in time, justice needs to prevail. Now, I've survived a lot of death threats. I mean, this kind of conversation is exactly the thing I was told I couldn't do on air, right? Because, hey, I want the death penalty for killing my hometown, right? I mean, I want to hang these traitors, starting from here. And that we haven't done it yet is the reason our kids have to try to struggle to compete against a $2 job in China or whatever, and so if we're ever going to preserve liberty, and hey, I'm so happy to say this on RBN, if we are ever going to preserve liberty, not gifted to you by a government or a politician or some corporation, but endowed by your creator, we have got to invest in living standards that do preserve that. We cannot undermine, we just can't keep shooting ourselves in the foot. We've got to find a way to invest. So, yeah, I have no problem with Trump trying to push up actually the worldwide minimum wage. I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about, because everyone else, the power structure and
Dave,
the money. All those
Dave,
thieving billionaires want to drag it down. Yes,
Dave,
sir.
I got a question here. I mean, great that Trump is apparently pushing for a minimum wage down in Mexico. Where is his support for minimum wage here in the United States? Because that battle's been going on for quite a long time. The cost of living keeps going up. The cost of goods is going up. Wages and salaries are not keeping pace with the cost of living, and that is an absolute reality. If you want to talk about investing, the only way we're going to get our economy back, the only way we're going to get a high standard of living for the American people back, is we have got to go back to being a manufacturing superpower, and we're going to have to launch that with brand new technologies so that we can make products the rest of the world makes, but the rest of the world cannot make for themselves. One of the biggest mistakes.
So, Mike, what I'm hearing you saying, and brother, I get it. I mean, because this has been on my mind for a long time. When we're told that we have to compete, I'm sorry if this is offensive to somebody, with all the world's slaves, right? The Chi-Coms, those, if we're told we have to compete with the absolute bottom of the barrel, then my son, your family, so I don't get. We have to. That's why protection is not a bad thing.
Okay,
right?
Dave.
I mean, in my mind,
Dave, you completely missed the point I'm making. We can't compete with those other countries who are making televisions and laptops and cars and stuff with established technology now. The big mistake that this country made is they have invented a lot of really great stuff. A lot of it came out of the Apollo Moon program, microchips, things like that, Silicon Valley, and then American corporate leaders, encouraged by our own government, said we can just ship the manufacturing to other countries. And once it was there,
and why did they do that, Mike? I mean, and why did they do that? To maximize profits.
To maximize profits. Yes. And it was a very short-sighted, foolish thing to do. And if we want to become a great economy again, we have to invest in developing brand new technologies.
Well, we can't,
Dave.
We can't when they own our government, man. I mean, we just cannot defeat the billionaire class these days because they totally own both parties. They have a lock on everything. And okay, so I'm in Springfield, Missouri. I mean, what am I supposed to do? I mean, right here, right now, to try to increase the income and opportunities for working class people when we are totally owned by, Walmart has 8 stores in this town. I took them to the Supreme Court to try to defend downtown. They bought the former Chief Justice. You've heard that story.
Yes.
You just can't, dude. I don't.
All right. Well, if you want to give up, go ahead. But I'm working on a plan to try and get this nation.
I'm not the dude to do. I'm not the dude to do that. That's why I'm talking to you.
Well, okay, but it sounds to me like, you're coming out with these expressions of hopelessness, saying, the government is owned, the corporations own everything, and I understand that's a reality. Okay, but at some point, I think even the billionaires are going to realize they're not going to go on being billionaires if the economy falls apart, and that they'd better start getting together in the spirit of John Nash and say, yeah, we got to start figuring out how we can restart this manufacturing powerhouse that made us all billionaires in the first place.
But Mike, here's the thing, and we're not talking to the people now who actually built the empire. We're talking to the third generation who are the most spoiled, slavish lacquers, sitting on a pile of money, and they don't care. Now, I'm not trying to be. I mean, because really, I want to find hope. I'm a father and grandfather. I mean, the last thing I want to do is give up. I won't. But we're not dealing with the people who knew how to produce it. We're dealing with the people who inherited this, and
okay.
Dave,
I got to let you go. We got to take a commercial break.
You know what I'm saying?
We got to take a commercial break, Dave. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the lines here for the rest of the show because I have got a ton of stuff I need to get through today here. So, Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Thanks a lot for taking my call. Brett Kavanaugh, you said that his primary allegiance is to the United States.
No, that's what he said. He said his primary allegiance is to the Constitution.
Well, no, you said that he said. Yeah, the Constitution. It didn't recently Donald Trump have like something going on with his new Fed chairman Powell? You know, loosening the grips, you know, or keeping the, you know, keeping the interest rates low, basically.
Oh,
nothing.
yeah. They were talking about the rates. Well, I mean, if the Fed pushes the rates up too much, I mean, the economy, our economy is so fragile. And it's almost, it must be very frustrating.
Our economy is even more fragile.
Well, actually, if you look at around the world, economies are in trouble in so many countries. Their currencies are in free fall. We're going to be talking about that a little bit later in this segment of the program. But it looks to me like that entire global private central bank Ponzi scheme could start coming apart. And I imagine it's very frustrating for Donald Trump to sit there and realize, you know, that there really isn't anything he can do to fix it. He can go through the motions, and he can get the media, and he can do speeches, which he was doing just a little while ago, about how the jobless rate for vets is at an all-time low. And he's turned out to be just another politician and not a particularly good one.
Well, or his hands are tied, right? I still have a little bit of hope left. So the only problem really is it's not the fact that they owe $21 trillion. It's the fact that it takes, you know, a couple of $100 billion, like close to $500 billion a year to service that now, and it's going to go up if the interest rates go up.
Yeah, that is a problem.
If Brett Kavanaugh is a true constitutionalist, he will realize that. Why is there even a Federal Reserve? Why is it here?
Oh, I'm sure he's already thought about that during his rise through the political world. Nobody can be involved in either economics or politics without understanding. The Federal Reserve is a fraud. It was unconstitutional. Yeah. The Constitution basically invests Congress with the right to coin money and regulate its value, and does not allow the Congress to delegate the money creation authority to a private bank.
Yep.
Okay.
Isn't that crazy? And up in Canada, in our Constitution, it actually allows for the government to borrow from from our central bank at zero or little interest.
Yeah, but they don't do that anymore.
G7.
They don't do that
happened
anymore.
With France.
There was a big lawsuit about that. Canada's government is now borrowing from regular interest-charging banks and sticking the Canadian taxpayers with the interest. Anyway, Al, got to let you go. Got to do a break for station identification. Back with Hour 3 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, Hour number 3, and getting on back to the economic news here. Miller Coors is going to eliminate 350 jobs company-wide as part of a restructuring plan. And boy, I guess when the beer breweries are having to cut back, you know the economy's in terrible shape here. Now, here's an interesting little lawsuit, if you will. And this is one of the few times I agree with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Basically, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled that cities cannot prosecute people for sleeping on the streets. And basically, this was on behalf of 6 homeless Boise, Idaho residents who sued the city in 2009 over an ordinance that said you can't sleep in the public spaces. Well, where else are they going to go? And the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said this really does amount to cruel and unusual punishment, and I would tend to agree with that, especially because these people haven't done anything wrong for which they should be punished. But we do have a massive homeless problem, and you can't look at that and reconcile it with the claim that our economy is doing well. It's doing really well for the 1%. It's not doing well for anybody else. Up in Ontario, Doug Ford has now canceled Ontario's Guaranteed Income Program, and he had a very interesting statement. He said, why should we be paying people not to work? Which I would tend to agree with that. But they just ran out of money. I mean, this idea of guaranteed income or minimum basic income, somebody has to pay for it all. You can't just keep printing money out of thin air and keep a nation moving along that way. You can't just move the money around in circles very fast and call that a working economy. You've got to be manufacturing products. You've got to be growing agricultural produce. You've got to have products to sell. That creates jobs. The jobs create income for these workers who then go out and buy the products and so forth. It's just common sense. It's economics 101. And it's amazing seeing how Wall Street, in their desperation to not face up to the reality of what's going on around them, keep coming up with ever more bizarre theories about how the economy should be making them richer than they already are, and how that's a good thing. The cryptocurrencies are in trouble. Apparently, Goldman has suspended their plans for a trading desk. Bitcoin is back below 7,000. Ethereum is tumbling back down. So the tulip bulb may have popped on that one here. Now, JP Morgan's top quant, Marko Kolonovich, predicts a great liquidity crisis is about to hit financial markets. And he's saying there are going to be flash crashes in stock prices followed by social unrest. And he's saying central banks will be forced to make unprecedented moves, including direct purchases of equities, or there could even be negative income taxes. See what I said about fantastic theories to keep things going? Another story coming on out. Major currencies all over the world are in complete meltdown as the 63 trillion EM debt bubble implodes. And they're talking not just drops or plunges, they're talking death spirals. Over the past 16 years, the emerging market debt bubble has grown from $9 trillion to $63 trillion. That's a lot of money. And the issue is that everybody wanted to make these loans, get these countries going, but they weren't able to get their industries and agriculture up to be able to repay the loans. Here in the United States, the average monthly rent has hit an all-time high of $1,412. It's the biggest increase in 18 months. Remember what I said before about cost of living is going up way out of pace with increases in wages and salaries. India has now joined China in defying Donald Trump. They're going to be importing Iranian oil. So that's going to take a little bit of the sting out of the Iranian sanctions. India had said they were going to do it, then they pulled back, then they went ahead and did it again. A little bit of waffling over there. Back when the United States tried that oil price war with Russia and started throwing sanctions all over them, there was an observation that one of the fallouts from this was going to be Russia would be forced to become more self-sufficient and stop buying and selling on the global stage, and that this was actually a good thing. And now it's turned out Russia is now an agricultural superpower. And even better, it's GMO-free. And U.S. wheat can no longer compete. In fact, the U.S. Wheat Associates just closed their Moscow office. Not even going to try and sell more wheat to Russia. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Okay, let's talk about the situation with Nike And it's just amazing how this whole Colin Kaepernick thing just got out of control. I can't even believe it's still being an issue. So normally companies will avoid controversy because it's bad for business, and Nike has lost something like $3 billion off its cap. And so by getting this Colin Kaepernick to be the face of their Just Do It campaign, it has created a huge, huge ruckus. Now, James Wood is dumping his Nike stock in response to the Kaepernick Just Do It ad campaign. Doesn't want to be involved with them, and I can certainly understand that. And the outrage is exploding online, and it's dragging up all the old bad stories about Nike, about how they're using virtually slave labor factories in foreign countries to make these shoes. And so this has really flashed back on them rather badly. And Nike's endorsement of Kaepernick is seen as disgusting. It's anti-American, it's anti-cop. Nike just took sides in the culture war, and it sided against the men and women in the police force. It sided against those who still respect the flag. And it's going to come back to really haunt them a lot. The National Association of Police Organizations is calling on all member officers, their families and friends to join the nation's real heroes in a total boycott of Nike products. That's going to be a lot of people and a lot of sales. People are posting photos of burning their Nike products to Twitter. Frankly, I think they'd be better off just giving to the homeless, but that's their decision here. So here we have this guy, Colin Kaepernick, who's a black guy. He's the perfect story of a meritocracy-based black success story. He's paid millions and millions of dollars for throwing a ball around. He was adopted by a white family, and yet all of a sudden he's come on down on the side of Black Lives Matter and Antifa, hating whites and hating America, which is the country that made him both famous and rich. How much sharper than a serpent's tooth to have a thankless child. This guy should be happy. But again, liberals don't want to be happy. It's part of their self-image that they're always offended, that they're always upset. I mean, this guy's got it so good. And I think it's having an effect on public support for NFL football. It's certainly going to have an impact on Nike now. And for this guy to basically stand up there and take the side, I'm against police violence against black. And it turns out, if you look at the numbers, it wasn't there. White people are much more likely to be shot by the police these days because of all the negative publicity. It's more liberal manufactured outrage here. And Nike is now stuck. They already signed the contract. They're going to have to use them. They're going to have to pay them the money. And it's going to be an epic public relations disaster. Nike may have just destroyed their own company. Over in Naples, Italy, their mayor, Luigi De Magistris, is basically trying to launch an autonomous cryptocurrency. He's calling the euro a putrid currency. He wants to go back to Italy, or at least Naples, having their own internal currency, which is a symptom that you start to see happening when national economies do get into trouble. During the Civil War, when the Union was counterfeiting the Confederate money to try and destroy it, individual cities and towns in the Confederacy just started printing their own currency for use within the city borders. During the Depression of the 1930s, when trust in the U.S. paper dollar had vanished, cities were printing their own currency. So there's theoretically no difference between that and setting up a cryptocurrency for your city here. Over in Great Britain, there's talk now from one of the major think tanks over there that there may need to be a major overhaul of Britain's economy, as far-reaching as the post-war reforms and the Thatcher Revolution of the 1980s. And they say it's necessary to address Great Britain's chronic failure to raise the standard of living of millions of workers since the 2008 financial crash. Well, a big part of that has to do with two factors. One, the control on the economy coming from the European Union, and two, the strain on Britain's economy from all the refugees. If you look at how much money there's available for standard of living for the population, the more the population grows, the lower the standard of living has to be. That's just common sense. So they're going to come out with a new plan for the economy, and it's not going to fix anything because it will not address the underlying problems. Now, obviously, Brexit will. Also in Great Britain, General Dynamics Land Systems is starting to lay off workers. Not a lot of them, but apparently this is all tangled up with this defense order for Saudi Arabia, which is on again, off again, on again, off again. When it's on, they hire. When it's off, they let people go. I imagine that's a great deal of stress. Down in Australia, we were talking yesterday about how the housing bubble appears to be popping and complicating the situation there for people who are now in those underwater mortgages. 40% of refinance applications are not being approved, which tells us that the experts are expecting, they have not hit the bottom yet on this one yet. NASA is considering a way to fund some of its missions. They're going to merchandise, and they're talking about NASA astronauts having their faces on cereal boxes and corporate logos on launch vehicles. And let's see. So they're apparently, NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine is saying, let's get the corporations involved. Let's commercialize space. And I think it's the right idea. And it's been floated before. In fact, believe it or not, there was actually a TV commercial that was filmed up at the space station involving an inflated Coke can. And it came and went. Nobody was really impressed, despite the money that it cost. But yeah, I don't have a problem with that. You know, as long as we get that space program going, because as I was trying to tell to that previous caller, the only way we're going to get our economy back, we have to come up with new technology nobody else has and make products everybody wants but cannot make for themselves. We came out of the Apollo moon program with this amazing technological advantage over the rest of the world, on which we could have built a huge manufacturing economy, and we blew it. The corporate leadership said, no, we'll just license it to other countries. It's the age of globalism. Get with the program. Government went along with it. And that technology was basically produced using American taxpayers' money. It should have been used to make a better life for the American taxpayer, but it wasn't. These other countries that we have allowed to take over manufacturing of products that our nation invented, they're not going to give it back. They're not going to make that same stupid mistake. They're laughing their heads off at us. We're going to have to come up with something new and radical, a lot of something new and radical. And the best civilian technology incubator there is that space program. Getting on to Europe and immigration and refugees, Sweden's anti-immigration party is looking for a record win. The election's just a few days away. Their poll numbers are surging. And it's, again, another blow to the EU. That's why Macron was out there bad-mouthing their candidate the other day. The Europeans are just tired of what's going on here, with cars being burned, the rapes, swimming pool sex assaults. it really is out of control. And I don't blame the people of Europe one tiny bit for wanting to protect their culture and their country. That's instinctive. Now, here's a real good one. Apparently, there was this Ghanaian national, Kweku Adebole. He's 38 years old. He's a fraudster. He was responsible for the biggest trading loss in British banking history. And when the Home Office deported him for that crime, he accused them of racism. That's the new buzzword. If you do anything to any of these refugees, oh, you're just being a racist. No, you actually caused a lot of economic harm to a lot of people. That's why you're being deported. Now, a man of North African origin was stabbed 2 German tourists on the Spanish island of Mallorca before he was shot in the ankle and restrained by police. Apparently, the man was shouting in Arabic and threatening to replicate recent terror atrocities. And when he refused to cooperate, basically he was arrested and he went down screaming, "You are racist, you are racist, you are racists." Up in Finland, they've been studying their migrant situation, and they've determined that the majority of their migrant crisis arrivals are not refugees from war. They're economic migrants taking advantage of the open borders policy to come up to Europe and get a bunch of free stuff, putting more strain on Finland's economy here. Now, every time we talk about the illegal immigrant problem here in the United States of America, one of the talking points the open borders people like to use is that we need the illegal immigrants to do the jobs that Americans won't do. So somebody actually went out to do a study to find out what are the jobs Americans won't do. And it turns out there are none. They studied 474 job categories as defined by the Chamber of Commerce, and only 6 are filled by a majority of immigrants, both legal and illegal, and none of the occupations were dominated by illegal immigrants. This was a study released by the Center for Immigration Studies. And even in those 6 jobs, 46% of the workers are native-born Americans. Maids and housekeepers, 51% native-born. Taxi drivers and chauffeurs, 54% native-born. Butchers and meat processors, 64% native-born. And so forth and so on. It's a lie that they need the illegal immigrants for anything other than to vote Democratic. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And once again, we are standing in front of you with our hands outstretched, begging for just a few coins to help see us through in this fight against these giant, ultra-rich corporations that are basically trying to take over our nation and our world. And we're clearly heading into the kind of dystopian future that George Orwell warned us about, or Aldous Huxley warned us about, or for that matter, George Lucas with THX 1138, where we're just uneducated drones that do our work. We don't know who we are, where we came from, what our history is, because we're more useful that way. And it's not a new idea. Andrew Carnegie, when he was funding his Carnegie Foundation for Education, their policy was that young people should only be taught to do what they were going to do for a job and how to fill out the paperwork and nothing else. It would just trouble their little heads to know any more than that. Same rationale they had regarding the antebellum plantations, the slaves there. So getting on back to our beg here, Republic Broadcasting Network really needs your help. What really happened really needs your help. The postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. Angela Merkel is now warning her country's business leaders that the Brexit talks could possibly collapse. They've been going along saying, we'll get a deal, we'll get a deal, we'll get a deal, we'll get the divorce payment, we'll get all this stuff. And now Merkel is saying, yeah, it could all fall apart and the Brexit could be hard. And she's trying to get Germany's business leaders prepared for that shock. And I think probably one of the biggest problems that we have here is, again, this is not about economics, really. It's not about what's good for the British people or the people of Europe. It's a fight between the nationalists and the globalists. And the globalists are just pushing as hard as they can to try and get their agenda through and get those borders dropped and get all of these various ethnic groups blended together so they can't be sorted out again easily. Having some wild weather here. Tropical Storm Gordon didn't quite make it to hurricane status, but it has made landfall, and apparently it's killed one person, a child, by blowing a tree into a mobile home. The storm is already weakening into a depression, but it's dumping a lot of rain, spawning tornadoes. So it's still a mess. If you're in the area of the storm, keep an eye on it. Hurricane Florence is the next storm in the pipeline, although that one is expected to veer north before it makes landfall on the Atlantic seaboard, kind of like the two that we have out here, which is Norman and Olivia, which Norman is actually quite close to us, but it's expected to turn to the north tomorrow. I'll be watching that very, very closely. Japan, however, had a different story. They had their strongest typhoon in 25 years. 8 people are known to be dead, and the video was just dramatic here. Osaka's main international airport has been shut down until further notice. 3,000 people are stranded inside. This is the strongest storm for the entire year for the entire planet. And I remember seeing this video where this ship had torn loose from its moorings and just was grinding into this bridge. Getting into the world of computers here. The other day we were talking about how DuckDuckGo is really taking off. And it's my search engine of choice. And how, as Google got caught up in all the scandal about data and censoring, DuckDuckGo was really taking off, and they'd secured $10 million in financing to improve their platform. And now the founder of DuckDuckGo, Gabriel Weinberg, is saying, yeah, it's not crazy to challenge Google. And he's absolutely right. We should not allow ourselves to be dependent on a single monolithic entity because they'll abuse their power, as Google and Facebook and Twitter have already demonstrated. Now, Facebook is in a little bit of trouble because small businesses are now leaving Facebook because the algorithms are hobbling revenue-generating traffic. Little bit of a whoopsie there for Facebook. A lot of small businesses have Facebook pages, and the algorithms are costing them money. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, Facebook has announced they're building a war room to monitor the midterm elections in real time. They're actually setting up a physical room full of computers and people in order to fight off bad actors who wish to influence voters, meaning conservatives. I mean, they're basically admitting they're going to be going on in and deleting anything on Facebook that's challenging to the liberal establishment. Now, that to me is crossing a line. That is interference in the election process because people use social media to exchange ideas about the candidates. back in 2016. It was the independent media that, was informing people of the Clintons' dark past, the Uranium One scandal, and asking the questions that should have been asked about that private email server. Well, now Facebook is going to take care of that. No more will liberal candidates have to worry about their past indiscretions being made public, because Facebook is just going to eradicate them as soon as they're posted. It's right out of George Orwell. So I guess anybody who's not a liberal is now considered a bad actor. Okay, now a lot of people who use Google have received an email informing them that Google has responded to a court-ordered FBI demand for the release of their data. This is according to Motherboard. And apparently several people who received the email just made it public and said, what's going on here? Now, the notice appears to be related to the case of Colton Grubbs, who has been indicted for selling a $40 remote access tool, or RAT, which claims to be able to hack and control computers remotely. Last year, Grubbs pled guilty to creating and distributing the hacking tool to thousands of people. And so federal prosecutors are saying Colton conspired with others to market and distribute the Luminosity Link RAT that made it simple for buyers to hack into computers to view documents, photographs, and other files on the victim's PC. The RAT also let users view what victims were typing on the keyboards, disable security software, and secretly activate the webcam on the target's computers. Well, I'm glad they got this guy. And he probably thought himself was very clever that he came up with this little tool. But it's another reminder that our society's coming apart, and we've lost our moral compass. I mean, the idea that people think this is cool to do. I'm going to make a tool that allows bad people to break into good people's computers, and I'm going to sell it for $40. Okay. There is a rogue version of a file hosting platform called Mega Chrome extension, and it's triggered a major security alert from the company. This variant was able to steal user credentials for sites including Amazon, Live.com, GitHub.com, and Google's web store, in addition to private keys for cryptocurrency wallets. And Mega is investigating how its Chrome web store account was compromised. So apparently this went out through the so-called official channel. And you got to be very careful you're on the right website. And this is a good example. There is a fake Viber app which steals your WhatsApp data. And it looks exactly like the real application, and apparently was being peddled through a website that looks like Google Play. And what the miscreants will do is they'll set up their bogus website, and they'll register it in a domain name that's maybe one letter off from the real domain, like a common spelling mistake or a common typo, and they'll register that. So people will be typing. They see what they think is the Google Play site they're supposed to be on, but they're actually on the bogus site. Double check that URL and make sure that you entered it correctly. And it really is annoying that we have to take all these security precautions on our own for this, but nobody in government seems to really be taking all of this cybercrime seriously. Or maybe they're just impotent in the face of it. And if the U.S. government can't deal with the out-of-control cybercrime, then we shouldn't be looking at actually getting into a war with anybody. In the realm of political correctness, you're going to love this one. Okay, up in Brunswick, there was a truck crash on August 22nd of a truck carrying over 4,500 lobsters. The truck hydroplaned, it rolled over onto the side of the road, the truck body tore apart, and the boxes of the lobsters were sent flying. The driver had only minor injuries, but the lobsters all died. PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, are asking for a granite tombstone at the site of the crash, in memory of the lobsters who suffered and died on this spot. It's going to be 5 feet tall. I understand what PETA was originally about. And when they originally started up, yeah, humane treatment for animals, especially harvested farm animals, but this kind of grandstanding actually diminishes them. It makes them look borderline silly. Okay, over at George Washington University's law school, writing professor Iselin Gambert came on out with a claim that milk is a tool for white dominance and superiority. It's racist, ignoring the fact that all human women of all races have the ability to produce milk. But Gambert just said, I'm going to go looking for racism. What about chocolate milk? How's that sit with you? See, this gets back to something that we talked about the other day, where the liberal snowflakes aren't really offended. They're looking for victims. They're looking for anything they can make an issue about to prove their moral superiority, to feel their empowerment. I'm empowered. I've denounced milk as racist. Earlier this week, and I actually saw this, I didn't post it, but there was this article from a website with this photo of a woman, and it was captioned, I am 23 and I've had 3 abortions. Yes, I have. And it was on this website called Shout Your Abortion, which is, as you can imagine, promoting the idea that abortion is great and it's perfectly normal and you should be fine with it. Well, as it turns out, the story was more fake news, because the actual woman in the photo is a conservative who's never had an abortion. They simply stole her photo and used it to illustrate this article, saying that abortion is great and abortion is normal. Very unethical. And speaking of unethical, and I know we've mentioned this before, but this just rubs me the wrong way. Now, it all began with this homeless veteran who spent his final $20 to buy a stranded woman gas. And the woman and her husband set up a GoFundMe account to get some money for the homeless veteran. So far, so good. And probably they did start it with a noble intention, and they figured if a few $100 come in and they'd turn it over. Instead, $400,000 poured on in, and I guess that much money was simply too tempting for this couple. And the homeless veteran's been trying to get the money, and they've been stalling. The couple's been stalling. They claim that he was spending all the money on drugs. They were on TV just recently saying there's still well over $150,000 left. Like, that makes it okay for them to have taken the other $250,000. But when the veteran, Johnny Bobbitt, and his lawyer finally got control of the fund, 9 months after it was set up to help him, they found it was absolutely empty. It was absolutely empty. Now, again, as a nation, we've lost our moral compass. We've lost our sense of right and wrong. And maybe because, from the point of view of the elites, the liberals, the money junkies, right and wrong are outdated concepts. There is simply winning, and there's simply power. There's simply wealth. Anybody who's concerned about right and wrong, well, they're just the suckers. So let's talk about the Pope, because boy, is he in hot water. And apparently this whole pedophilia thing is just blowing up. And there's really nothing that he can do about it. You know, Pope Francis is prescribing prayer and silence. Like, if they don't talk about it, it'll just go away. Well, heck, that worked for the last few centuries here. But Pope Francis has been forced to acknowledge this because he's got no other defense. Francis is stone cold guilty of the charges levied against him by Carlo Maria Vigano, the Apostolic Nuncio to the United States. They've got him dead to rights, and we're hearing rumors that the Pope may resign, the way Pope Benny the Rat did. Boy, 2 in a row. Now, this Catholic editor, Philip Lawler, editor of the Catholic World News and author of Lost Shepherd, How Pope Francis is Misleading the Flock, is saying this sexual abuse scandal is creating such divisions in the church that it could split like it did in the Reformation. And half will go one way and half will go the other way. And I don't know what he's envisioning, whether the child molesters will have their own church over here and the people who think children ought to be left alone and taken care of will have their church over here. And apparently, we were talking the other day about this Catholic-run orphanage in Vermont. It's since been shut down. The abuse is happening there, including killing a kid. And now there's a new one in Nebraska is just popping up. There was this conservative Catholic diocese in Nebraska, was the only church that in the U.S. that refused to participate in annual reviews of sexual misconduct that were a key reform enacted in the wake of the 2002 Boston clergy abuse scandal. Well, now accusers have started coming forward in recent weeks saying that, yes, there was a lot of sexual abuse and misconduct by the clergy in Nebraska. And now the diocese is facing a potential criminal investigation and criticism that it mishandled abusive priests, even as it should have been subjected to increased scrutiny after the Boston scandal. How many more of these are we going to have to go through before somebody says there is something seriously wrong here? You cannot recognize this kind of behavior with claims that the clergy is the earthly face of the ultimate moral authority in the universe. Underneath those white robes, there are some really, really black hearts. Okay. Over in Great Britain, the Foods Standards Agency ran a test on 665 food items, meat items, and discovered 145 of them contained DNA from animals that were not listed on the packaging. Now, the brands and the shops implicated have not been revealed, which means it was a completely wasted exercise. But according to the Food Standards Agency, they're saying the results point to deliberate inclusion of foreign meat, possibly as part of a scam that stretches across the food sector. In other words, they're adulterating these meat products with other meats that may not be as nutritious or healthy. And apparently they had fresh and cooked lamb products with some curries and kebabs labeled as lamb, made entirely from beef, which is much less expensive than lamb. Or they could be mixing in horse meat or who knows what all else. It really is scary when you can't actually trust what's on the store shelves. By the way, there has been a warning from the CDC, nationwide warning, regarding Kellogg's Honey Smacks. Apparently, there's been a salmonella outbreak. 30 more people have contracted salmonella from eating Kellogg's Honey Smacks cereal. This brings the total number to 130 cases in 36 states. 34 of the patients have had to be hospitalized. And they first thought the outbreak, which started last March, was brought into control in June when they recalled 1.3 million cases of the cereal in affected states. But apparently, no, it's still out there, and they're warning everybody to avoid the cereal just completely. Good news from here in Hawaii, down on the Big Island. Kilauea has settled on down, is behaving itself, and now they're looking at what areas of the park are safe to reopen. And they're talking about reopening some of the areas by September 22nd, which is going to be good. It's going to bring the tourists back. That's going to be good for the town of Volcano, who just, along with all the people downslope who lost their homes, the town of Volcano has just had a real economic body slam because of all of this. And by the way, just because Kilauea has settled down, the big eruption is over, but it's still erupting. It's been in a continuous state of eruption for like 18 years. There's always something going on. There's always a lava flow to go see. There's always lava pouring into the ocean somewhere. It's just the really big blowout eruptions you don't want to be there for. So they're getting ready to open that up. It's snowing in the Alps for the second week in a row. And Greenland has gained a huge amount of ice for the second year in a row. Gosh darn that human-caused global warming. They've had record cold in Australia. They're getting August snow, or they got August snow in Turkey and Calgary. So the winter is, as the Farmer's Almanac predicted, going to hit early and hard. And apparently, even though Florida is warm in the summer, it is now getting so cool in the winter that Florida orange trees are starting to die from the cold. They're very sensitive to cold weather. And there's been a shift to planting olive trees, which can better withstand the cold. All right, we're going to take another break here for commercials. We're going to be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today, and we're getting in some news about human-caused global warming. Down in Australia, Energy Minister Angus Taylor has unveiled a new energy policy focused exclusively on reducing electricity prices, which is a signal the Morrison government is just abandoning all efforts to lower carbon emissions. So the Australian government has gone full skeptic on this global warming thing. The Paris Climate Accord has basically unraveled. Everybody made a big deal about signing it, and it was going to be a wonderful thing. And they travel all over the world for their regular meetings here. But the fact is, none of the signators to the agreement ever did anything about it. And so it's effectively dead. Now, here is an interesting little story. Even though the world is cooling, you won't hear that in corporate media, CO2 is increasing. And what they're discovering is the fact that it's regreening the planet. The global tree cover is expanding because of the extra available CO2. Now, believe it or not, the global warming people are out there. They've been trying to say that carbon dioxide is a poison, that it's poisonous to plants. No, of course not. Carbon dioxide is essential to plants. It's the greening molecule for the planet. And so there's this new science study out there saying that, yeah, the increased carbon dioxide is stimulating tree growth in areas that have been deforested. And you know what's going to happen when these trees grow bigger and faster? The level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere will go down. It's a naturally stable system. Over in China, they're attempting the largest artificial rain experiment in history on an area about 3 times the size of Spain. And they're basically doing this huge cloud seeding operation. And critics are saying this is going to threaten ecosystems. Cloud seeding doesn't actually create rain. It simply redirects clouds to rain in a different location. And there have actually been cases here in the United States where cloud seeding will be used to stimulate rain in one part of the country, and then downwind from that, where they don't get the rain they're normally expecting, they'll file a lawsuit. So it can get a little bit sticky over there. Russia is now saying the leak that affected the International Space Station, actually in one of the Soyuz spacecraft, was not a meteor, but appears to have been a deliberately drilled hole. And they described it as having been held by a wavering hand, and that there had actually been several attempts at drilling before the drill bit got a bite and actually went on through. So, was it sabotage? We don't really know. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. And please take what you learn here and share it with everybody that you know, especially the part about how all of these corporate social media companies are trying to stifle conservative voices going into the November midterm elections. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.